My name's Steve Kuhn. I'm 75 years old, and I've been clamming on the Great South Bay for over 50 years. It's been a long, long time. When I started, I was a young guy out there. Now I'm an old guy. When I started, there were thousands of guys clamming. Now you can count them on two hands, the amount of guys that are clamming left on the bay. I started writing this book about 10 years ago, and I figured I better finally finish it before I forget what I wanted to say. So I did, and I titled this book Hard Work, and there's a reason for that. I wanted to be able to show what it's like to be a full-time clammer on the Great South Bay. To do this part-time is different than doing it full-time. When you work every day and you want to make your living on that, you have to go out day in and day out. It's just a really, really hard job, but I kind of fell in love with it. I always thought clamming was a very interesting life. And when you meet someone and you tell them you're a clam digger, their eyes light up. You think of automatically, you're out on the sun, you're out on the water, it's freedom, you're your own boss, and that part is true. But it's the day in and the day out grind, and that's one of the things I wanted to show. And the fact that there's hardly any clammers left anymore, I want to be able to relate that and pass that down to other generations. So that's two of the main reasons why I wrote this book. I'm going to start by reading the first chapter in the book. And I want to be able to say why I made this the first chapter and why I thought it was important. Okay, this chapter is entitled The Game. One Saturday afternoon in late October or early November, I was clamming on the bay off of East Islip. I was working fairly close to shore in about 5 to 6 feet of water. The weather that day was cold, damp, and dreary. Dark gray clouds covered the sky, and a 10 to 15 mile an hour northeast wind with light to intermittent rain was falling. Oftentimes it was like this at this time of the year. On shore, there was a football game going on. Sound travels on the wind, and I could hear everything. The band was playing, the fans were cheering. I could hear the public address announcer describing the plays. When the touchdown was scored, there was a huge roar from the crowd, and the band played the school's fight song. I felt that I was actually at the game, although I wasn't. I looked around, and as far as I could see, there wasn't another soul on the water. I thought to myself, this is pretty neat. There are hundreds of people on land into this football game, and no one even knows that I'm out here. They were doing their thing, and I was doing mine. I really did want to be exactly where I was, and I thought that this really is part of being a bayman, just doing your own thing. I said to myself that if I can be out here on a cold, wet, damp day at this time of the year, I must really like what I'm doing. And I did. This was the first chapter in this book. I was 19 or 20 years old when this took place. And when you're 19 to 20 and you don't know what you want to do with your life, at least I didn't. I said, this wouldn't be too bad a way to spend your life. The cold, the dampness, that didn't bother me. It would bother me now, but back then it didn't. So this is kind of like the day where I decided, you know what, I'm going to be a clammer. This was actually about 2.5 years after I had started clamming. A friend and myself, we got our boat together to cut our expenses. And we would go out with 2 guys on a boat. Well, this particular day, he couldn't go, so I went out by myself. And I had a pretty good day clamming. And I said, you know, I really, really do like this. It felt really good for me to be out there. So that's why I opened with this chapter, okay? Now I'd like to go to the first day that I ever went clamming. I was working at a nursery with a couple of friends of mine, and we'd always talked about going out on a bay. And back then, there were a lot of people clamming. A lot of people were on the water. They would, working and clamming. There were tongers and rakers and all kinds of guys out there. So my friend who had worked at the nursery, he'd gotten a clam boat about 6 months earlier. And he called me up one day and he said, do you want to go out? And I said, sure, I'd love to go out. So I met him at the dock, and he picked me up, and we took the boat and we went to Heckscher Park, which was about a 20-minute sail. And I still remember this day because it was absolutely beautiful. It was in the springtime, but it was like high 60s, low 70s. The sun was out. There were little ripples on the water. I said, "Oh my God, you know, you're on land, and when you go out in the water, this is like an adventure." So we got to where we were going to go clamming, and he had an extra rake and a set of poles, and he set them up for me, and he set his rake up, and we threw the rakes in, and we went to work. He kind of showed me how to pull on the rake. I watched what he was doing, and I tried to do the same thing. We worked for about 5 hours, and I think in that 5 hours, we caught 2 bushels of clams each. He caught 2 bushels and I caught 2 bushels. Where we were working with, it was soft white sand. It was like a really easy place to work, and there were only clams there. So it was a great place to learn for a first day. So my friend said to me, he goes, "You caught 2 bushels of clams. That's what I caught." He goes, that's pretty good for someone who's never clammed before. So that made me feel good. Well, after 5 hours, my hands were like chopped meat. I had blisters all over the place. I was tired, but it was kind of like a good tired, and I felt really good about it. Back then, the price of clams was $14 a bushel. I was working at a nursery, like I said, and my take-home pay for the week was $89. So in my mind, I said, "Oh my God, I made $28 in one day. If I work 5 days a week, I'm going to make more money than I did at the nursery. And this is a lot nicer, and I love being out in the water." So I said, "You know what? We're going to try this." So I had another friend of mine that was working at the nursery, and we decided to go in together and get a clam boat. So we looked around. We found a clam boat in Bayshore in the back of this old great big house on a canal. We went back there and we looked at it and we said, "Oh, that's going to be our boat." And Liam, that's going to be our boat, and that's what we're going to do. Is it supposed to be like that?
Maybe. He put that on, I think.
Okay.
Keep going.
We went down there and we looked, and we had to get a motor because the boat didn't have a motor. So about 3 days later, my friend called me up and he goes, "I found the motor." It was a 40 horsepower Evinrude or Johnson. We paid $300 for that, $300 for the boat. We went down there, we dragged the motor through the yard with a couple of cans of gas, and we put it on the boat and we sailed to Sayville. And we were young, we really didn't know what we were doing, and we didn't even have a place to dock it. So by these apartments and these houses in Sayville, there was a small marina. We took the boat in there and we tied it up, and we started to go clamming. Well, about 2 weeks after we tied it up, we found a note on it and said, "You're in somebody else's dock space. You better get this thing out of here, or we're going to tow it away." So with that, we took the boat and we started to go up Browns River, and we were looking for a dock space. A friend of mine who I went to high school with, his parents owned the Cherry Grove Ferry. So he happened to be standing at the dock as we went by. And he goes, "What are you guys doing?" So I said, "Hey, we're looking for a dock space." So he said, "Well, just pull it in here." So we pulled it into the ferry, and they had some slips there, and we tied it up. Well, that night we went out and we ran into my friend Tom, and he goes, "Oh, I asked my dad," and we didn't even ask him. He said, "You can keep the boat there." So just like that, we had a dock space, and that was over 50 years ago. So I was at the Cherry Grove Ferry for like 25 years, and at the Sayville Fire Island Pines Ferry for another 25 years or so. And that's where I kept my boat. Those people were so nice to me. They helped us out in big time, especially in the beginning. We would give them clams, and it worked out great. So that's kind of how we started. And we went out clamming in the summer, and we had a great time, especially the first couple of years. You know, we worked hard, but not real hard. If it was hot, we'd jump in the water and go swimming. We'd take a fishing pole out, we'd cast it out, and we'd go fishing. If it was cold or it was windy or something, we didn't go to work. We just took the day off. we really enjoyed ourselves. It was part of the time, like kind of the best days of my life, because we were young and free and we didn't have really too many cares. I went to college in the fall and the spring, and through the summer, I paid for my college expenses by clamming. So that's what we did for, I guess, about 2 or 3 years. Well, as I said in the beginning, when I worked off of Heckscher Park, you could see that you could do better with one person on a boat as opposed to two. So my friend and I split up. He kept the motor and I kept the boat. So I got another motor for the boat and he got another boat for his motor. This way we went on our own. So we gradually started to get a little better. Well, there were a lot of people clamming back at that time. Some people would tell you things and other people wouldn't tell you anything. You get to know people. I had a friend out there that I met and his name was Rocky, and that was his nickname. We called him Rocky Raccoon because he was always singing the Beatles song by the same name. So I always clammed in Heckscher Park in the soft sand because that's the only place I know. Rocky, sometimes he'd be gone for a couple of weeks and all of a sudden he would show up. So one day I was talking to him and I said, where do you go? How come we don't see you all the time? He goes, I go all over the place. And it depends what the wind's doing and what the tide's doing and everything. He goes, so tomorrow, he goes, I'm going to go to Bayport. And he goes, if you want to come down there, try it down there. I said, all right, I'll give that a shot. The next day I met him in Bayport and I met two of his friends, Clyde and Bill. These guys had been clamming a lot longer than I had, and they were really, really good clammers. I said, oh my God, look at these guys. They're way, way better than I am at this. So I decided it's time for me to start to get serious about this. So I decided I'm going to watch and listen and learn. And that's what I did. And we would talk about different things all day long, how much pole to pull, what type of rake to pull, how long teeth. And what happens is you gradually get better and you start to learn things. Bayport had a lot of different bottoms. It had mud, it had sand, it had shells, it had hard bottom. Whereas where I was in Heckscher Park, the only thing there was sand. So I had to learn all these different bottoms and learn how to work in them. So for me to get serious about this, it was time to go to work a little harder than I was going. So there was no more swimming. I didn't fish anymore, and I didn't take it easy. So I'd like to read another chapter from the book that I wrote that kind of explains why I titled this book Hard Work. Okay. I'd like to explain why this book is called Hard Work. Clamming to me wasn't just a job, it was a lifestyle. As I put my time in and I learned, I started to get better and I could see that I was improving. I was starting to catch up to my friends. I played sports in high school. I wasn't afraid of competition. In fact, I welcomed it. If someone was better than me at something, I wanted to be just as good or better than them. My friends were good because they knew where to clam, how to clam, and when to clam. Because they worked really hard, I decided if I was going to be good or better than they were, I was going to have to pick it up and start working harder, and so I did. It's amazing what you can get out of yourself when you set your goals high and put your mind to it. I decided to work as hard as I could and do my very best each and every day. I took one day at a time, and when I thought I had worked as hard as I could possibly work, I would try to squeeze even more out of myself and work even harder. An average day consisted of working 7.5 to 8 hours. Lunch was 15 minutes, and that was it. At the end of each drift, you would eat and drink something. After all, an engine needs fuels. Then you would move back up to your buoy and do it again. This is what you did for the day. It was like exercising and working out or doing aerobics for 7 to 8 hours every day. As for the week, I would try to work 5.5 days, especially from spring to fall. Some weeks you just couldn't do it because the weather was so bad. Most of the time, wind kept us home. If it blew 25 miles an hour or more, it was usually kind of futile. Besides, we worked ourselves to exhaustion and we welcomed a day off now and then. To say the least, you got in good, no, great shape. There was no more lounging around, fishing, swimming, or just going through the motions. This was work, hard work, and I loved it. And it was what I wanted to do. This is one of the points that I wanted to get across in this book. When you do this full time and you do it as a living, you have to go out, like I said, in all kinds of conditions. If it's kind of funny, if you ask a clam digger how he's doing, invariably he'll tell you what he caught for his best day. And everybody says, well, if you do that 5 days a week, that's great. Well, it is, but what you don't factor in is if the wind blows 20 or 30 miles an hour, if it's pouring rain out, or if it's snowing out, or it's pea soup fog, or there's all kinds of weather conditions that come into play. So it's constantly changing. But what a clammer will always tell you what his best day was. As far as conditions, I've been out in everything you can possibly name. Fog, rain, snow, sleet, ice, thunderstorms, 90 degrees, 20 degrees, you name it, I've been out there in it. Sometimes you get caught in it and it comes up really, really, really fast, and there's nothing you can do about it. The point of this, though, is that you learn to get better, you pay attention, and this is all, I'm going to say, over the course of time. It doesn't come right away. It takes years to learn all this. You have to pay attention to details, what the tide's doing, what the wind's doing. Sometimes the littlest shift in the wind will make all the difference, or the adjustment of the pole, just like 3-4 inches, will make all the difference. And tides go up and down, and the wind blows hard and it blows soft, or sometimes there's no wind at all, and sometimes it blows 25 miles an hour, and you have to make adjustments for all this. And once you do it, then you kind of categorize it and you say, oh, when it does this, I'm gonna do it this way, and when it does this, I'm gonna do it that way. And you learn this stuff as time goes by, and you just gradually get better. And you combine that with the hard work, and you just kind of do the best that you can possibly do. I'd like to talk about one other day I had, and I call it the best day that I ever had on the bay. When I went to Bayport, there's a place that we worked, and it's called the Reef. That's what we named it. And basically what it is a point of land, like a sandbar that goes off of Blue Point. And it goes out into the bay, I would say 3/4 of a mile. And at the top of that sandbar, it's like 5 feet of water. And in either side, on the west side was all shells, and it went into mud. And on the east side, the edge dropped off from like 6 feet to 10.5, 11 feet. Well, anyway, the reef was closed for like 6 or 7 years because of pollution. And we knew there were a lot of clams there, and there were rumors that it was going to open up, but we really didn't pay attention to them. So one day, this was like, I think about a week and a half or so before Christmas, I was heading out east early in the morning, and I saw a couple boats over there. So I drove my boat over, and I saw a friend of mine that I knew, this guy Red, and I said, is this open? And I can still remember his exact words. He said, that's what they say. Well, I thought it rained for sure, but I guess we didn't have enough rain. So I put my rake together, and I went to work, and it was about 15 boats there. And the conditions that day were flat, calm. There wasn't a ripple on the water, which aren't the best conditions, but it was really good conditions for that day because there were a lot of clams there. I'm going to say that the 20 boats morphed into 100 boats, and the 100 boats became 250. And before you know it, there must have been 800-900 boats in this one area. It seemed like everybody who was clamming knew that this place was open. One thing I learned, when places open up, you have to get there early, and you have to be quick, and you have to be really on top of things. I knew this bottom like the back of my hand. And on the east side, where it dropped off from 6 to 11 feet, there were a lot of clams. So I put myself right on that edge, and I would make 2 or 3 grabs and catch between 50 and 80 clams a grab. And they were pretty fast grabs. So to make a long story short, I had about 7.5 or 8 bushels in the first 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And a friend of mine had his little brother on the boat, and he wasn't really doing very good. So he gave me his brother on my boat, and his brother counted the clams for me. So I paid him $5 a bushel to count, and he was happy as anything. And I wound up catching 15.5 bushels of clams that day. That was more clams than anybody in the whole place had. I got home late that night. That was before cell phones. We couldn't make a call. When I came home, my wife said, "Where were you? You're late." So I told her, I said, "Well, guess what I caught?" She said, "What, 4 bushels?" I said, "No more. It's 5, 6, no more." So finally I told her. She said, "Well, with that, you can stay out anytime you want that late." We paid some bills, and we got 2 tickets to Barbados, and we went on a vacation in I think January or February that year. That was the best day that I ever had on the bay clamming, and I will absolutely never forget it. I worked in Staten Island for 5 years. That was a whole different ball game. That was deep water. The clams were depurated, and they were put on we put them on a truck, and they were taken out to Peconic and put on racks, and they could clean themselves out. That was a whole different ball game. There were twice as many or 3 times as many clams in Staten Island as there were in the Great South Bay, but there were a lot of headaches. You had to get up at 3:30 in the morning and take the Belt Parkway in, and you had to leave around 1 o'clock. And if you left after that, sometimes it took you 3.5 hours to get home. I saw 9/11 happen in there, and we were looking, the wind was out of the east that day, and we were looking right at the Twin Towers, and we saw the smoke come out, and we couldn't believe what was happening. I went up to a guy in front of me. He was a fireman, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "A plane hit the tower." I said, "Oh my God." The first thing I thought was terrorism. And then we saw the other tower, and then we actually saw the one collapse. That program was shut down then after that for I think a week or a week and a half till things calmed down. That was a senseless tragedy. That's something else that I won't forget. I probably saved, I think, 2 or 3 people on the Great South Bay. There was one friend of ours. We would work on the ice a lot, and we'd cut holes in the ice. And what would happen, the ice would skim over overnight, and it would be thin ice. So this older guy came out one day. He wasn't looking what he was doing, and he stepped right in the thin ice and went right through it. So we fished him out. We pulled him out. The temperature was in the, I don't know, high 20s, low 30s. And I still remember he ran all the way to the shore, and it was about probably 1/8 of a mile, and he lost a boot. So he hobbled all the way into shore with 1 boot on and 1 boot off. He was so thankful that we got him out. He actually owned a farm stand, and he gave us free vegetables for a year. I had another guy that was in a rowboat one time, and he was pretty close to shore, and I was out about a mile. And things can really change in the Great South Bay really quick. I mean, it can be really nice, and all of a sudden the wind can kick up. Well, that's what happened to this guy. He had a pair of oars, and he wasn't really dressed for it because the weather was nice. Well, he started drifting out further and further and further. And he got out there where I was, and he started screaming and yelling, and the wind was blowing about 20 miles an hour, and it was below freezing. And if I wasn't there, he probably might not have made it, because he had a long way to go to Fire Island, and it was rough and rough. So I towed him in, and he was so grateful and thankful that happened. One time in pea soup fog, I heard a little motor come, and some girl in a boat, small boat, came up to me. And she was lost, and she wanted to know where Davis Park was. So I pointed her in the right direction, and she took off. And about a half hour later, I heard another engine, and it turned out to be the same girl, and she was going around in circles. And if this fog is so thick that you can't see 20 feet in front of you, and there's no wind, you have no bearings. Because I know, because that happened to me. So I took my rake apart, and I had my GPS, and I told her to follow me, and I took her to Davis Park. So she was very grateful and thanked me very much for getting her there. That's just a couple of the things that have happened to me over the years. I started Clam Power when I was in school. I was in the design school at NC State, and we had learned how to silkscreen. This was a time in the early 70s when all the power movements were going on in the country. There was white power, black power, power for the people, flower power. So I was sitting at my desk one day and reading a comic strip, and it was a talking clam in there. And I said, you know what? It's just like a light bulb went off my head. I came up with Clam Power. I said, you know, these were like serious things they were talking about. I wanted something lighter. So I drew a clam with his fist raised, and I wanted it to represent the strength of the Great South Bay, the clamming industry, the environment. And I drew a couple of sketches, and the one I liked best, I picked, and that became Clam Power. So I silk screened some T-shirts in school. We gave them away. And when I came home, we silk screened a bunch more. We had them on our couches and our chairs in our living room. And I went out in the bay. I showed them to my friends, and they thought they were great. So they wound up buying them, and other people bought them. The next thing I knew, Clam Power was all over the place. Well, it wasn't all over through me, because people copied the silk screen. You can turn it on. But that's kind of what happened. That's how Clam Power started. We met so many people through our website that, how am I going to say, they're like water related stories, that people have the same ideas, and they're kind of the same type of people. And we've sent these shirts all over the place. Probably the neatest place was we sent one to Afghanistan. A guy showed us, here's the Clam Power website. You can check that out. But we sent these all, and I've heard from so many people about incredible stories of people wearing shirts and things that happen. I had a guy come up to me, and he said the best days of his life was when he was clamming on the Great South Bay. And he goes, I was carefree, young. He goes, I didn't have a care in the world. He goes, you know what I do now? I go, what? He goes, well, I'm on a SWAT team in New York City. And he goes, I don't know if I'm going to come home alive. He goes, I got a couple more years. And he goes, I have so much stress. He goes, when I get out, I'm going to go clamming on the Great South Bay. Back on it. He told me that story. I said, oh my God. I said, that's amazing. Then I had another young lady came up to me, and she got a shirt, and all of a sudden she started crying. And I said, what's the matter? She goes, oh, this reminds me of my grandpa. He goes, he wore this shirt all the time. He goes, all the time he had this on. He goes, oh, I just miss him so much. So I just gave her a hug, and I said, well, think of your grandpa, and think of, you know, how he would have liked that. And he loved his shirt, and you do too. So that's great. In the Sable movie theater, when we first sold these, there was a movie playing called Diggers. It was about clammers on the Great South Bay. We set up a table in the lobby. People went up and watched the movie, and when they came down, they kind of mobbed us. I said, oh my God, because clam kind of, I should say, it faded for a while as the clamming faded. And we brought it back, and we have a trademark on it now. So this was the first time we sold it since then. And it was a young lady who came down. She was like in her 30s, and she says, oh my God, when I was 13, this was my favorite T-shirt in the whole world. I'm so glad that they're back. She was so happy that she was able to get it again. So that's kind of basically how Clam Power started. And like I say, we ship these all over. Just today, we sent out 3 shirts to Maine. So we have a lot of fun with it and we meet a lot of really, really, really nice people. To sum everything up, I would say, to me, I had a great life clamming on the Great South Bay. I mean, it's really, really hard work. I can't do it anymore like I used to. Physically, you feel the aches and pains, especially when you get older. But if I had a trade, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I would call the Bay just a beautiful, beautiful office. And it's kind of like my office. I just feel good and be blessed that I was able to do this for my whole life. And there's a lot of other ways I could have spent it, but I'm very happy that I was able to spend it this way. I'd like to play, if you could play the video of on the website.
Sure. Coming right up. Let's see.
This is a video of clamming.
I'm going to make it large.
Okay.
That's your life, your sweet wine, catch more fish than you. Fish bites if you got good things. Here's a little tip that I would like to relieve. Fish bites if you got good things. I'm a going fishing, yes, I'm going fishing, and my baby going fishing too. I went on down to my favorite fishing hole, baby ran me a couple of mine.
No, it just lowered itself. Now the music is gone, so the video's still going. Well, that's the video of that was taken, and that's on our website. And there's a little bit of a story behind that too. A friend of my son's was doing his thesis or whatever on how the Bay interacted with the communities. So he interviewed me one time, and Rob never said a lot of words, but the next thing I knew, he took a couple of pictures of me, and my face was on a poster in Sable as the Bayman part of his project. So I mentioned to him, I said, if you'd really like to see what clamming is like, come out with me when the weather gets nice and I'll take you out and I'll show you. So he said, all right. So it got to be, I guess it was early, I guess that was the summertime. He said, "Oh, I'm gonna bring a friend of mine out." And I thought he was gonna come out and take a few pictures. Well, Rob never said very much. The next thing I know, he took this video. And they made our website. He was learning how to do this, and he's the guy who came up with our website. And I never knew he was going to do that either, but it came out pretty good. And the rest of all this stuff is history with the Clam Power and everything. So if you'd like to ask me any questions or anything like that, I'll be happy to answer whatever I can.
I have a dumb question. Were
No,
you picking up, were you also pulling crabs along with the clams, or was just all clams?
Oh, no, well, I would catch crabs,
Okay.
but
And-
here's a funny story too. Like I had a what I would call a pet seagull on the boat, right? And this guy would
Mhm.
eat right out of my hand. He was a great big blackback gull. And if you threw a crab on the deck, I mean, like a horseshoe crab or a blue claw crab, he would tear it apart. And in 5 minutes, that crab would be eaten and pulverized. Well, one day I had this other seagull on the boat, right? So I threw this crab up there, and this was a young seagull. Well, before the seagull could get the crab got the seagull, and he bit his foot. So the seagull started squawking, and he was shaking. He flew up in the air, maybe 100 feet, and he was like kicking his leg, trying to get the crab off his foot, and diving and squealing and squawking. And it must have taken 5 minutes, and finally the crab let go and fell in the water. But that was one of the funniest things I ever saw. But we would catch, sometimes I would catch 7, 8, 10 blue claw crabs a day. I give them to my friends, like, and they would cook them up. And sometimes I would take them home and cook them up.
You should consider a clam podcast. No, people would, and sit around and talking about your adventures and all. I mean, I would absolutely love to listen to some of your just little short stories. You ought to think about that.
Okay, I would have to figure out how to do that.
You
And
got
then a cookbook, and then do a cookbook too.
Thank you.
cookbook.
Cookbook, okay.
Did you ever, when you were pulling the rake out, and, doing the process of clamming, did you ever find anything under the sea, like something like a lost from a shipwreck, or anything like old coin or something? Or...
Well, I can tell you what we found. I mean, there's a chapter in this book of things that I dug up. I probably caught 20 or 30 Danforth anchors in my time. I don't know how many clam rakes that people have lost. One day over at Davis Park, somebody lost a wallet, and we were catching $5, $10, and $20 bills. And another time, I caught a gun. I think it was a pistol or a 35, whatever it was, and I caught that. It was all rusted. Somebody threw that over. I did catch a guy's wallet one time, and it turned out he was in the Navy, and he lost it 4 years ago. And I brought it back with everything intact. There was $80 in there, and I gave it to his mother. And she was going to call him. She thanked me up and down, but I never heard from him. I can tell you another interesting story. A guy called me up about 4 months ago, and he said, "I read your book." He's an old timer. He's 86 years old, right? He goes, "I read your book. I thought it was fantastic." He goes, "I really enjoyed it. I used to clam." And he goes, I want to take you out to lunch, right? So I met him at the local diner and he goes, I have something I want to show you. And it's worth a couple $1,000s. He goes, I dug it up clamming. Well, we had lunch. So I said, well, what do you got? And he takes this thing out. And I knew exactly where he caught it because I'd worked there. Right off of Heckscher Park, about 20 feet from the shore, there's a trench. And it drops off from like 3 feet of water to about 7 or 8 feet of water. And he says, I'm clamming there. And this is a long time ago. He says, I pull this thing up and I thought it was a rock. Well, it wasn't a rock. It was an Indian artifact and it's called a banner stone. And the Indians used it either in as a weapon or in their ceremonies. And it was a rock kind of like shaped like a hatchet head, but it had a perfectly round hole drilled right in the middle of it. And he showed me this thing. And he brought it to an archaeologist, and the guy said it was 3,000 years old.
Wow.
And that if he wanted to sell it, he could get $1,000 for it. He said, I don't want to sell it. I'm going to keep it. But that was something really neat. And every once in a while, you'll catch old pieces of pottery and stuff like that. But I have well, we just took them down, but I have a shelf full of about 70 or 80 bottles that I've caught, old bottles, round bottom bottles, old beer bottles, soda bottle, you name it. I mean, those are kind of like the clams, though. They're disappearing too. But I've caught a lot of things over that time. I caught a 50-pound Navy anchor that I used as a drag weight. And it must have weighed 100 pounds when I pulled it up because you couldn't see what it was. It had old oysters growing on it, coral and everything, and I had to chip everything off to see what it was. And it was an old Navy anchor, and that was a great drag weight that I used for a long time. But there's a lot of stuff that winds up in the bay.
Yeah, a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people's garbage.
Yeah, well, that too.
But it's amazing. I mean, just the stories and I mean, everybody loves the clams. I mean, you know, you bake them or, you know, there's all types of different ways. We usually would bake the clams for a while and until they like pop open. But do you have any special like ways of preparing clams for different situations, like serve them like together or in two halves, or you know?
Well, I like to put them on the grill, let them pop open, and put melted butter and garlic on them. They taste delicious that way. And New Year's, I usually make clams casino.
Oh, that's
With bacon and we put them with garlic, lemon, and the clam juice together, and it comes out really good. And believe it or not, in like through the Clam Power website, I've had people come up, families, and they'll buy like 4 T-shirts, and they say, you know, some of the best times we've ever had, we go over to the Fire Island side and we tread clams up as a family, and they have hibachis and barbecues there. We throw them on the grill, and they were in the water 5 minutes ago, and here we are eating them. And what could be better than that? I mean, and if you think about it, what could be better than that?
They're delicious and very healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
Does anyone else have any questions? We have, when will you come back and give a talk? Well, we could have another one. This went very well, and perhaps we can do something with clam preparations as we get closer to the summertime. And Clams Casino is one of my favorites. We usually would do Clams Casino. Usually the Knights of Columbus will throw that together because a lot of the guys are firemen, so they know, you know, how to put this together. All of this.
Yeah, you can eat those like popcorn. They go down really quick and very easy.
Jen says, looking forward to going clamming this summer. Excellent. Best
Well,
of luck.
that's good. I hope she enjoys it.
And
If the coronavirus ever breaks, I wouldn't mind talking live, but we'll save that for another day.
well, we've been returning to live. We've been giving it a shot, and it's been going okay. We've been getting some nice size audiences, but I'm hoping as we get into the summer that we'll be able to draw in larger crowds. But yeah, we'd love to have you in person. We could definitely do that, and you're welcome to bring some Clam Power T-shirts and some hats and sell them. We'd perfectly set up a little table for you, and that would be fantastic.
Okay, we'll see.
So I'd like to thank you for your time, and thank you, Liam. And the stories are fantastic. And, you know, some of them may even make a great screenplay for a motion picture. Screened in the film festival. Yeah, you know, you could do an anthology, take your best stories and put those together and, you know, sort of map it out that way in a screenplay. But
Well, that's only a few of them. I have a lot of them.
thank you, everyone, for zooming in. Sorry for the little technical glitch. And thank you, Steve, for a fantastic presentation. And we wish you all the best.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Thanks for giving me the platform to speak.
You're very welcome. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.